Welcome to the May 5th, 2023 Helm developer call. And with that, let me go ahead and drop the link in case you all don't have the notes open. And we have nothing on the agenda topic for today. So does anybody have anything they would like to talk about?
How about if anyone wants to talk about my hip for failed jobs and pods? Anyone want to? I know that one's been out there for a little bit, so thought maybe I'd bring that one up, and
That's a good idea. Let's talk about it.
I can throw a link in the notes.
I have it open. Hold it into a window I can share. Shrink it down for somebody not on a desktop screen. All right, you all should be able to see. Is this the hip you're talking about?
This is it.
All right. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Annotations for displaying job output. All right.
So the premise here was there's already a PR out there that I think it's like the third highest thumbed up. I don't know if the Helm project uses that metric much, or
we don't.
What kind of?
We should.
Okay.
We don't.
Okay. And I wanted to write a HIP to kind of describe why I thought it was important for our use cases and kind of the design, and put a little bit more formalism around it, and see if we could, figure out if there's things we need to change, or if that PR could basically go in mostly as it is. The only thing in here that the PR doesn't do that I have in here that doesn't have today is the way it outputs is just slightly different. I added on and actually I could send it to him, because actually on my own fork of the Helm chart, or not of the Helm chart, of the Helm project, it actually does show the job name that failed before it just prints the output.
Okay. So would it only output on failed, or would it output?
So
yeah, so you could tell failed or succeeded or both. Okay.
Yeah, it does both. The use case that I have is failed, but it's more flexible than that.
Okay. This generally makes sense to me. I think I'll have time to go review it today, so I'm going to leave this open and in front of me.
Awesome.
Amazingly, I have fewer meetings than usual, so I'll go ahead and review it. The general idea seems to work for me. So
cool.
We would just need a second maintainer to come along and review it then, before it could go in.
Nice.
So that's one of the processes. Is you need for a particular area, just like the rules on the repository, right? You need 2 maintainers for that section to approve it before something can go in, unless you're already a maintainer, and then 1, because we want 2 maintainers basically accepting the proposal before it could move forward.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Okay.
I can shake down some trees and see if I can get someone else to take a look at it and provide their feedback on it too.
No, but I'll go through and review it today. We'll see what happens from there. All right. Is there anything else we want to talk about today?
I maybe have an interesting that we could just I don't know if it's really, it was just it hit me yesterday. Was I tried to use Helm 3.11 on a Kubernetes 127 cluster, and it had the Prometheus extensions installed, and I hit the bug that was the. Actually, I wasn't really sure what the exact cause was. I didn't really fully grok what was going wrong. But you get this merge API. It was just in. Are you familiar with that one? Have you?
The merge API?
Yeah, there was there was something in the API resources. Let me see if I can find it real quick. It was an interesting. It's fixed in 1.12 apparently. But
Interesting. So Kubernetes has a version skew of ±1 with its client libraries. So your client libraries for Kubernetes 126 should work down to 125 and up to 127. And that means Helm 3.12, that's what we just released. Get lost in here. So yeah, Helm 3. So for if you're running on Kubernetes 127, Helm 3.11 should work up to that without a problem, given Kubernetes version skew policy. Now there may be a bug or something in there, but that's what it should be. And in Helm 3.12, we use the client libraries for Kubernetes 127. And so that would be spot on, and that should be able to go down to 126 and up to 128 just fine. And usually the client libraries work for much older versions. I could grab Kubernetes 119 and Helm 3.12 will typically work with it, but Kubernetes just doesn't guarantee it. And so I'd be surprised if Kubernetes 3.11 had problems with a 127 cluster. And I'd be curious to know why, because that's not supposed to happen unless there's a bug.
yeah, I just put a link in the doc to the issue. I had to kind of go through my Slack history and find it, but I don't know if I fully understood. I went down the path a little bit, but I was a little too busy to really get into the details on why it didn't work. Convert API resource, that's what it is, not my it crashes in there somewhere in the client. So and it was interesting too, because we were actually using Helm as a library in one of our resources, and it was failing in there. And then I was taking Helm commands and running them, and it was working, and I was just getting the latest version of Helm. So I was like, what's going on? I'm like, oh, it was actually fixed in this very latest version. So took a little bit to figure it out, but
Malformed custom metrics. Is that it?
I don't know. So I never isolated it down to exactly it. This Kubernetes did have Prometheus installed, so it could have been related to the metrics. But it was weird to me how having a particular CRD installed could even mean that you could have a failure of a Helm install.
Yeah, that's confusing to me. Like, it shouldn't panic. We should have a nice output error. And that would be more my concern than anything else. So what this most likely is the Kubernetes API at some point came back with an error because of something with the way things were trying to be put into the cluster, right? Something's wrong with it somewhere, and you should get an error from Kubernetes. And Helm panicked because we didn't handle that error well. That's most likely what happened here. Now, what's that error coming back from Kubernetes? That's the interesting part. I don't.
Yeah, it was weird.
An invalid character.
If I did a Helm template and applied it, it worked fine. So I don't know. There's something very nuanced.
Yeah.
In this, and I wasn't fully able to understand what was happening, other than I know going to the Helm.
Yeah, and if you look
12.
at the call stack, if you look at the call stack here, right, it's inside of client Go, right? all of this stuff that's happening there, it falls back down into something happening inside of client Go. And that takes a while to reason through. Every time that I do it, I end up spending a lot of time stepping through client Go, trying to remember what's going on. And every time it gets easier, but what's happening was buried down inside of there. And so there was an error in there and we didn't get it. But client Go handles all of Helm's communications with the Kubernetes cluster, and it handles validations and all of those things. That's why we can use it, kubectl can use it. And this error looks like something, like there was an error down in there. And when you use Helm template, we don't use client Go to send everything to the cluster and communicate with the cluster. Instead, we spit it to output in a manifest form so you can do that. And the difference between the two is where the communication happens, right? And so this is probably a bug buried down inside of client Go.
Yeah, it's interesting because this was closed because they said the root cause was found, but I don't know if that, you know, like to me it wasn't necessarily the root cause. It was like you had a thing in like you, I guess you figured out the problem, but was it actually, you know, the fundamental root cause?
Yeah, and Helm shouldn't panic. We should give a better error than this. So there is a bug in Helm somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, anytime you see a panic, right, that's a spot to worry about. Could there be a security problem or something there too, right? So
yeah, and this is where we did not handle. So in our action, get version set. Where did it go? It's actually inside of, okay. Here's where it gets interesting. So this is inside of, so if you look at this, run with context, then get capabilities, then get version set, and then it jumps inside of client Go. If you look at the stack trace where it finally errored out. And so this error is when Helm, so you've got to get the capabilities to inject into the chart, right? So you go introspect the cluster, you find out its capabilities, the APIs in it, things like that. Then you're able to take those and pass them into the template engine in order to generate the template, because you can check for capabilities inside of the things, right? You can say, is this, you know, API available, right, at this version, things like that. Works for CRDs, works for core resources. You can check those things. We have to generate that capability list first. When you're doing Helm template, we assume you're not connected to the cluster, so we just use a default set rather than getting them from the cluster. That's why Helm template would work in this situation. But somewhere buried inside of client Go in trying to get those capabilities from it, when it asks the cluster for things, the Kubernetes client Go panicked out when it was trying to discover what was in that cluster. So it wasn't actually in the contents of the chart. It was when it was trying to read basically the CRDs and things in the cluster to know what was in it that there was a panic. So that sounds definitely like a client Go bug. And I wonder if they fixed it in a newer version of client Go. Because if I read this right, this was the .0 version of client Go that caused it. And
yeah, well, the latest version of Helm 3.12 fixes it. So something in between there. I'm not sure what it was. Presumably some updated dependency, because I don't see a pull request linked in the issue.
No. And where the panic and everything's happening is buried down inside of Kubernetes packages. So it was something down in there that caused it.
Interesting.
Yep.
Anyway, that was my interesting Helm debugging adventure yesterday, was figuring out this bug had hit me. So
okay. All right. Is there anything else? Anybody up for moderating or notes for next week?
I can moderate next week.
Oh, sweet. Thank you, Karen. Anybody up for notes?
I can do notes again.
Sounds great. We'll see if somebody can get to issue triage. And that's about it. Then I guess thanks everyone for coming.
Right, thanks.
Thanks.
See y'all online.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.